Mic check 1 2 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and I feel like I need to clarify. So yesterday, I dropped a video where I said that Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was not meant to be played online, and I think a lot of people took that like quite literally. So I want to explain what I mean. When I was in my early 20s, I bought a BMW 3 Series Coupe that came with paddle shifters on the steering wheel. That basically allowed you to go into this like Triptronic drive mode where you can kind of get the feeling that you were driving stick shift and you had control over the gear shifts or the shifting of the gears. And you could use like the the knobs on the actual steering wheel, the paddle shifters, to actually change gears as opposed to the gear stick. And at the time when I was younger, and I was just buying the car, it seemed like an amazing feature. I was like, oh man, I'm gonna be killing this, hitting the freeway, I'm gonna be paddle shifting all day. And what I quickly realized after owning the car for about a month was that I rarely ever used the paddle shifters. In fact, I rarely ever put the car into a Triptronic mode because as fun as it was, um, it just wasn't the most fun way for me to drive the car. Primarily because if I'm gonna act like I'm driving a stick shift, which I grew up driving stick shift. I know a lot of people don't drive stick shift anymore, but if I wanted to feel like I was driving a stick shift vehicle, I'd probably much rather prefer shifting the gears from the actual gear stick, right? As opposed to the paddle shifters. Don't get me wrong, a very cool feature, an amazing selling point for the car. It looked great on the car, right? Having a car with paddle shifters is always cool looking, but it wasn't the best function. It wasn't a function that I used the most. And I kind of sell that to say the same thing with Marvel vs. Capcom, right? So of course, when it came out on the Dreamcast, we all know the Dreamcast had internet capabilities. There goes the jack, right? So there goes the phone jack on the Dreamcast where you would plug in and connect online. So there were internet capabilities with the Dreamcast. And to be quite honest, I'm not sure if you were able to use the internet capabilities on the Dreamcast to play people online in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I haven't done the research, so someone can let me know if that was a possibility in the comments, and you can also let me know how effective it was, right? Um, because I think there's a big difference between capability and you know, or I think there's a big difference between being capable of doing something and actually wanting to do it or actually wanting to use it and knowing which way is the best way to engage in it. Now, to each his own, right? If there were online capabilities for Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and growing up, if that's the way you played people, if you played people online in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, then more power to you. For me, I grew up in an era where you actually went outside and saw your friends in person. Like you actually got out from behind the screen and you went to people's houses, where you left your home and you went to an actual arcade and met people in person. I come from an in-person generation, right? And not to say that this generation isn't doing that now, but as time has progressed and as people have become more comfortable with doing things online, there is less of a need to actually leave your house and go outside and like breathe fresh air and touch grass and like meet people outside. And so my point in that video was not to say that Marvel vs. Capcom 2 couldn't be played online. And it wasn't to say that people weren't playing it online. If they were, then more power to them. But for me, right, and where I grew up, and with the friends that I had and the friends that I grew up with, this was something we engaged with in person. We played these games in person because the generation before this generation didn't have online capabilities. Like no one was really playing PlayStation 1 games online like that. No one was really playing N64 games online like that. The generation right before this one still required you to leave your house and go meet your friends at their house or invite your friends over to your house so that you could play together. So when I say that it's not meant to be played online, for me, this is more of a subjective point of view. Um, this is a game that feels or felt better to me in person, because when you're with someone in person, the intensity is greater, the energy is in the room. Especially if it's more than just you and another person. Like if you're in a room and it's a tournament and you've got 3, 4 other people waiting to get on the controller, and you've beaten 4 different people in a row and people are just lining up and you're knocking them out, or you have one friend that you can't beat, but then you can beat a friend that can beat the other guy that you can't beat. All of these different dynamics, right, make for a great group atmosphere. And so that's why I say Marvel vs. Capcom 2, a game like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 for me was much better in person. And this might be something that maybe just relates to the folks that come from my generation. Um, I'm not sure. But again, back then, it wasn't all this like internet keyboard stuff. It was, hey man, you want to bring the Dreamcast over? All right, cool. I'll be there at 4. And then next thing you know, there's 5, 6, 7, 8 guys in a basement screaming, hollering, working hard on mastering air combos, looking for infinite combos. It's just a different energy than you just sitting alone in your basement and getting together with people online. Just a completely different experience. Same thing with the arcades, which we don't have arcades anymore. People don't go to the arcades like they used to. Where, and in an arcade setting, that was even more chaotic. And I know a lot of the younger generation won't be able to relate, but for those of you who grew up in the arcade era, you know that there was a huge difference between playing any fighting game, for that matter, at home versus playing it in the arcade, because arcades carried their own energy. There was a level of excitement, there was a level of anticipation, there was a level of competition that was just different. And the intensity factor is just different when you have someone right there in your face. Because there's a huge difference between talking smack online, I'm telling you. And I think that's really the thing. That's really the difference factor, right? These games are meant to be competitive. They're fighting games. By nature, they're competitive. So they're gonna bring out the competitive nature in you. And there's a big difference between being competitive in person versus being competitive online, because there's a huge difference between talking smack in person versus talking smack online, right? Like when you talk smack in person, you have to be prepared to like defend the smack you're talking almost to a physical point, because people get very upset. It's just like anything else. How many times do you watch an intense basketball game, an NBA Finals game, a Super Bowl game, where the competition gets so intense that dudes get physical? That's the difference right there, right? And so when I say like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is meant to be played online or not meant to be played online, it's not me saying that the capability isn't there, and it's not me saying that there aren't people who aren't going to enjoy it that way. What I'm hearkening back to is an era and a time where the way this was played the most and the most intensely was either at home with all of your friends with you, or in an arcade where there are multiple people there watching you. And when you take a loss, you take that loss live in front of actual people who are going to look you in the eye and say, you lost, right? It's a completely different feeling. And if you've never felt that feeling, if you've never had a chance to be a part of an environment like that, you just won't know. It's kind of like the difference between listening to your favorite artist and then actually going and seeing them live in concert. The atmosphere is completely different. The music might still hit you the same, but it's a completely different experience atmospherically, which can heighten the overall experience. I could be dead wrong, but let me know down in the comments. I'm interested in hearing from those of you who've been a part of both environments. If you've played this online and you've also played it in person, I'm interested to know how you feel you know, what the difference is, what the difference was for you, or if there was a difference, and how much that difference meant to you. Let me know down in the comments. It's the Y2K Collector. Again, you can play Marvel vs. Capcom 2 online if you want to. I wasn't saying that you can't, but trust me, completely different atmosphere. And if you do live in a city where you do have an arcade store, or there's a place where this game is in an arcade where multiple people are, I challenge you to go down there and spend about $4 worth of quarters and just hang around and play the game and play people intensely, and then go back home and play it online, and let me know if you still feel that both experiences are the same. Until then, it's the Y2K Collector. I'll catch you in the next video. Take it easy.